I'll introduce myself first. I'm Joel Man, philosophy. I guess I'm kind of running the show such as it is, but I am joined graciously by some students and faculty at Norbert College with whom I worked over the years in various sort of collaborative capacities, or taking students in my classes that were of more collaborative nature. And so I hope that they can join us and share their wisdom and experience with us. And so maybe they should introduce themselves in a row, starting with Brad.
All right. I'm Brad Vandenbranden. I'm a Norbertine, but I'm a graduate of the college in 2009. And now I'm down in Chicago, being formed for all things ministerial. So, but I'm due back here to peer soon. So yeah.
I'm Blake Hinson from music, and Joel and I taught music appreciation 3, 4, 5 times.
Music appreciation?
That's not the class.
I remember that.
I'm here for the wrong thing. Philosophy and music, that's right. It's Friday. Several times. Brad was actually, God bless him, in our first class and lived to tell the tale, so happy to see everybody.
Great. I'm Eric Brecky in physics. I have helped out with the philosophy of time class. I'm talking about how physicists view time, and then also with a Dante class about the astronomy of Dante, which is fun. So a few nice experiences like that.
Hi, I'm Donnie LaBar. I'm a junior economics major and English double major, and I've had 2 classes with Dr. Mann with the collaborative nature to them, and those are some of the best experiences academically I've had here. And they were both philosophy classes, so economics and English major, that was some of the best stuff I had, so look forward to telling you guys about that later on.
I'm Lindsay Spiegelover. I'm a senior studying computer science and Spanish, and I took Dr. Mann's philosophy of time class.
You're also not one.
Yes, and also intro to philosophy.
I'm Marcy Paul in Spanish. Joel and I wrote the NEH grant with his time together, so that I think that's my tie-in here. But I've also done quite a different amount of different kinds of collaborative interdisciplinary teaching experiences on campus.
Thank you. So basically, we're going to hear from our panelists in a few minutes. Before we get to the panelists, I just wanted to say a few sort of introductory things to raise the skids for the conversation. I'm not up here because I'm really an expert in anything, philosopher. So I don't have any sort of like deep wisdom to lay down or anything like that, but these are just some sort of reflections and general outlines that I've developed over the years sort of doing various collaborative teaching projects and thinking about the nature of things at, say, Norbert College and academia as a whole, and just thinking about ways to make these connections and tie-ins. And so yeah, I'll just talk for a few minutes about that, and then we can get to the panelists, because I think it's a good part. And we have a few exercises later for everybody to participate in. So yeah, I call this PhD Without Borders, and I call it that, and I have a picture of Hildegard of Bingen up here, who I don't know, I keep talking about lately, for some reason I can't stop talking about her. Partly because I see collaborative teaching as springing, at least in part, maybe in major part, from interest in and drive toward greater interdisciplinarity in academia generally and at the college. Right? And so, even though I don't know whether she actually did any collaborative teaching herself, she was really good at a lot of different things. She was definitely Scholar Without Borders, and so I sort of always hold her up as a kind of ideal in that regard. Interdisciplinarity. Why do I think that this is a big deal, a buzzword, if you will, in higher education? Well, in part because of the renewed emphasis on integrated learning and applied learning that we've seen. Renewed or new interest that we've seen lately, but I didn't do a whole lot of research, obviously, but I just looked at the Chronicle of Higher Education. I'm a philosopher, I don't really do research. I just sit down and say whatever comes to mind, and people publish it. In the last year, 143 articles in the Chronicle of Higher Education that have integrated learning or integrated learning as a keyword. 297 articles in the Chronicle on applied learning. And these are all contexts in which interdisciplinarity, sort of blending two or more disciplines, or sort of surviving on the fringes or the edges of different disciplines is important to do. At St. Norbert College, I think interdisciplinarity is an issue and almost an imperative these days, in part because of our liberal arts heritage, and especially the way that's become embodied in our core curriculum, right, which, as you all know, when we went to this new core curriculum model, from the old Gen Ed model, we, to the extent that we were in a more sort of disciplined or divisional, sort of focused model for spreading the wealth around all of our students, our categories now are much more interdivisional, interdisciplinary than they used to be. Also, I think the pre-professional emphases that we're now starting to stress with the renewed sort of emphasis on the science program, pre-medical, pre-health, and even pre-law, right? That requires, I think, or can be enhanced by cooperation between various disciplines, the sciences, the humanities, social sciences, and the humanities for law especially. And then again, I also see sort of Norbertine values as playing a role here too, insofar as there's a sort of contemplation and action component to Norbertine values. I think that also leads us in the direction of interdisciplinarity. And I really see interdisciplinarity as the driving force behind collaborative teaching, a lot of collaborative teaching that we will do, because we bring in others to help us teach us about things that we don't know about, and to maybe supplement or complement what we're already doing. However, there are apprehensions or concerns, as I say, putting the Q in concern, about collaborative teaching. I'm a philosophy major because I was good at English. First one, I'll call the qualification concern, right? And I've actually heard this echoed. I've heard both of these concerns echoed from faculty and administrators when talking about interdisciplinarity and in general across the campus. Qualification concern, faculty may feel lost in foreign territory, might not feel qualified to address certain aspects of what's on the menu, as it were. I mean, I've actually had faculty turn me down when I've invited them because they felt, oh, well, I'm not an expert in X. To which my response is, well, I'm not either. Right? Maybe two heads are better than one, but that's not how everybody feels. Right? Especially, I mean, I think that the problem can be especially acute because, you know, these days in graduate school, we're tending even more towards specialization, right, within our fields. And I think we're tending to lose when we come out of grad school our sort of more generalist, sort of expansive views of things. And we're focused on a very narrow set of problems, often within a subfield of an already fairly narrow discipline. Right? And so we're not really used to having to sort of think outside of those normal borders usually. And then I'll say the quality concern, and I've heard this especially from some administrators, but the worry that the product of interdisciplinary sort of course offerings, the ultimate product might be a weak course that sloppily involves multiple disciplines instead of a strong course in a single discipline. Right? So I have the weak tea, weak mind bugs. That. So, in some sense, the obvious solution is that these concerns could be addressed through collaborative teaching. One or more faculty members team up to deliver a course that no one could deliver on his or her own. So-called team teaching or co-teaching has been the standard model of collaborative teaching. The problem with the obvious solution is that though we're not oblivious to it, we all recognize that this would be a great way to make interdisciplinary things happen in the classroom. Many, even most institutions, including St. Norbert College, have human resource limitations that prevent us from doing a lot of team teaching. And there used to be more of this happening back in the day, but lately it doesn't really happen so much, because if you and I are working together teaching a course, then either we're not teaching another course, right, so the college isn't getting its full value out of us, or, I mean, conversely, we have to each teach 4 or more courses in order to compensate, the college to make that work. And we haven't really figured out a good solution to that problem yet. And so one of the things we want to think about today is what are the ways to work around this basic problem. So I say, the possibilities. What are the possibilities then for co-teaching, for collaborative teaching at St. Norbert College? There is the normal model, the course delivery model. Right? The traditional team teaching model whereby 2 or more faculty offer simultaneous instruction to students in a single course over a term. And one example from my experience is philosophy of music. Phil Musi, is that what you say? Musi? 336. And you might ask, well, how did that happen? How do you make that happen? I'll tell you in a second how we make that happen. Course design model. 2 or more faculty collaborate in course development or design, but sections of the course are delivered by only 1 faculty member at a time. So one example here is Philosophy 389. What is time? Marcy and I developed the course together, but we would not teach it together. We have not taught it together. We teach it separately. Or finally, what I call the course enhancement model, where the course is designed and delivered by a single faculty member, but the content is enhanced through student interaction from other faculty or guest speakers from outside St. Norbert College. Right? So this is basically, you design the course, you deliver the course, but you try to enhance it or supplement it with a lot of sort of interaction with people outside the course, guest speakers, other kinds of academic events, conferences, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So one example from my experience has been my brief history of body parts course, class 335, which functions, at least this last semester, functioned on this model, right, in a lot of ways. And I guess that's really all I have to say by way of presentation. Now I think we'll hear from the panelists who have experience with these various models, with me and with other folks in various settings, and just get a sense of the pros and the cons, the advantages, the disadvantages, the joys, the pains of doing it in different ways. So I think we'll start with Marcy first. And work this way.
Okay, thank you, Joel. Hi. First of all, I'm a big believer in this. I think that teaching Spanish the way we do, we're trained as literature people, but we also teach language and we have to teach Civ, and so we just see, from a Spanish teacher point of view, all of our courses are kind of interdisciplinary, so that always makes sense to me. It doesn't seem odd. Not to say there aren't problems. Other thing is that I've been here for so long that I've taught every kind of collaborative course up here. So I'll go through those kind of quickly. I did the true team teaching back in the day when Latin America and Central America was a real hot topic, and there were the wars going on, civil wars and U.S. involvement and Reagan's freedom fighters. And Larry McAndrews, who some of you know and a lot of you don't anymore, was our Latin American historian, and he and I team taught a course several times, quite a few times, on Central America. And I did the literature with some cultural emphasis, and he did the history. And it was really exciting. And that was a time when St. Norbert was able to let us team teach a gen ed course. I think they raised the cap to 40, from 35 to 40, and that counted as a full course for each of us. And if anybody says to you, and I know that Blake and Joel can attest to this, that you're getting off lightly, you're not. Team teaching is really hard. It's really rewarding, but it's not less work. it's a lot of negotiation, and if you're coming from different fields, when it really is best if you are. I mean, that's, in my mind, the most exciting thing is if you're coming from really different areas. You're used to grading in really different ways, you're used to really different kinds of writing, you're used to different levels of participation, different expectations. So negotiating all that, Larry and I used to kid it, like it was like a marriage. It was the little things that got you down. Not the big things. We love each other, we believe in each other, but goddamn, I can't grade my papers the way I want to. I thought the modeling was astounding. I thought it was one of the few times that students could see professors talk to each other, dialogue, disagree, debate. And they found that really puzzling sometimes. I think it was a really positive experience. So, what do I think? I think there aren't many drawbacks to it, except that it's very difficult to get support, financial support for that kind of team teaching in our environment. I gotta say that schools that have a lot of money do this a lot because they believe in it and they know that it works. And one of my children was privileged enough to go to Notre Dame, and they have more money than God can. And he had a course in political philosophy that was team taught by 3 professors and capped at 12. So if you have enough money, and he would say undoubtedly that was like a highlight because they were in such a small group with these kind of minds, arguing and debating and talking. It was like a super intensive seminar as an undergrad. You just don't get that very often. So. I don't think it's a question of belief or non-belief in the efficacy of these kind of classes. It's getting the resources. I also did the collaborative and course development, and I'm a really big believer in that too. I mean, for us, for Joel and me, it was a really learning experience. It was very different for me. The topic was very different. I could address more what I've done with Honors 101, where that's been a course that we have developed as a team. I worked on that with Howard Ebert and John Neary and TJ Leiterman, and so very different disciplines, very different perspectives, and I cannot rave about the experience enough. Not, again, that that's easy, it's really hard. You have very different perspectives, and your expectations are very different, but boy, is that a learning experience that I think really carries over for you and for students, and creates a really rich class. Again, not easy, and I think our first 2 goals were a little rough sledding. Yeah, that's really out of your comfort zone. Team teaching, I don't think is as far out of your comfort zone because there's 2 of you saying, how can we make this work? But when you have 3 or 4 people coming at a topic with very different division and discipline and experiences, I think the reward is tremendous, but it's a lot of negotiation. For students, again, I don't see, the great thing is there are multiple perspectives. They see those conversations, they see an enriched curriculum. The biggest drawback for students, I think, in Honors 101 or any kind of common course like that is grading. And they're very aware of who grades how. And because I'm director of honors, except for this semester, now it's sent to Joe. They will come to my office and say, I got this grade, you want to read my paper and tell me what you would have given me? And I say, no, I certainly will not read your paper and tell you what I would have given you. And we stress to them from the beginning, we're all very different people, we grade differently, that's part of the experience, get used to it. But of course, among us, we talk endlessly about, can we make rubrics that are easier to adhere to? Do we have can we come to a common understanding of whether we're gentle or harsh, Yeah, so, we are present a very united front, but of course, amongst us, that is a concern, is how are our students perceiving us. The course enhancement, I'm a big fan of too. We do that in Honors 101. We also teach Honors 301, which is preparing for life after St. Norbert, and that's mostly people coming in. And again, I think that's a 2-credit course, so it's easier. I really believe in speakers coming in, whether they're coming from off campus or on campus. I think off-campus people come in with a certain richness and a life experience that we do not provide. Caveats are always that I'm always telling students, these are not professors. You cannot expect them to talk like, act like, lecture as professors or not professors, so it's a different experience. Sometimes it throws students to have, we have police officers come in, we have business people come in, we have farmers come in. So these are very different kinds of voices. And students, you find out quickly, are very used to our voices. You know, they're very used to a professor. And someone who's not a professor would approach the material differently. Is it worth it? Absolutely. So I put a few notes about good, bad. I think, you know, I was thinking a lot about this and I came to my decision. My final thought was that good teaching is good teaching. I mean, good teaching always demands the same thing. It demands expertise. You know, if you don't have expertise in your field, I mean, I believe that I could teach German day by day and just keep a chapter ahead, but it would not be the same kind of course as my Spanish course. I think you know, the planning, and what we're going to all be saying, I think, is when you are working with somebody else, the planning goes way up. Your planning time increases exponentially. But planning is absolutely key. And it's a key, it's even more of a key when you're 2 or 3 or 4 of you, or when you're bringing people in. Because you want to really establish ahead of time why you're doing what you're doing. You want to tell the students why you're having a visitor. You want to tell them why you're team teaching. You want to do that in a normal class. You know, I mean, the longer I teach, the more I realize how explicit we have to be about why we're doing what we're doing and how we have designed the course. But that need goes up and up and up the more people you include in the course. And finally, I just think there's a huge, that level of tie back in is huge. I mean, preparing them for what's going to happen, but then afterwards, if you have somebody come to your class, you got to figure you're going to lose the whole next period too. You're going to use the whole next period tying that back and deconstructing with your students. And you're going to run into more stumbles that we have to come back and explain or talk about with students. Things can go bad. You know, when things go bad, that means that you're going to take more time walking through that with students. And, or if you're team teaching and you don't agree, walking through that with students. Why did we agree? No, didn't that you always agree?
Oh, we just fight in front of them usually.
Well, Larry and I really didn't agree in McAndrews. I mean, I was much, you know, lefter, and he was much righter in politics, and I didn't always agree with his history. It was like I knew nothing about, but I believe it. And Larry really struggled with like fiction. He goes, "But this isn't how it happened." I say, "Larry, it's fiction. That's what it's fiction. It's not history." You know, so students would see us really kind of wrestle with those things with each other. Not that we were angry, but they just were amazed that professors didn't agree, even on the same topic. So anyway, those are my original thoughts. A lot more planning, a lot more setup, a lot more debriefing. Worth it? Absolutely. I wish that most of our courses were team taught or collaborative taught. I'm trying to keep to my time limit. I'm just sit here.
So I took the Philosophy of Time course with Dr. Mann, and I didn't actually know that he planned it with Dr. Paul, so I was coming at this from a different perspective. But the idea was that we had our main lecture, and then we would have guest professors come in every couple weeks to kind of give their perspective from their field of study. So we had people come in from Spanish and psychology and physics. And so it was really interesting to see people from these different fields of study come in and talk about this philosophical concept of time. So I think it's really, like Dr. Mann said, a testament to St. Norbert's liberal arts education, because we really see that you can come at one concept or one idea from multiple different perspectives. So a couple advantages that I really pulled out of it was that it provided a break in the schedule every so often, so it wasn't we came to class every day, had the same discussion. You know, we got a little bit of a break in that rhythm. And
Got a break from Dr. Mann.
yeah, because it was such a chore to listen to. But then again, that also presents itself as a little bit of a disadvantage, because we are in that rhythm of, okay, we're going to come to class with all these ideas, we're going to discuss them, but then when these other professors come in, we kind of have to sit there a little more passively and listen to what they have to say, and then wait until that kind of discussion point came around. So it was just kind of learning a balance there from the student perspective. Let's see what else. Oh, for me, being a computer science major, taking a philosophy class and then hearing from psychology and physics, it was really interesting for me to get that exposure to different fields of study that I might not normally get, because computer science is, you know, technically a very isolated field of study where it doesn't really interact with the rest of the humanities. So that was really interesting for me to also get face time with different faculty too that I might not see on a regular basis. And yeah, it was really good to be able to sit in discussion with the rest of my classmates too, because it was an honors section. And so we really got to all keep an open mind about these different people coming in to talk about time from different perspectives and what they perceive from that.
Cool. So I took class 335, Brief History of Body Parts, which Dr. Mann mentioned earlier, and there are 7 people in that class, 7 people. And yet, just the experiences we had were pretty incredible. So, I mean, the class is called the Brief History of Body Parts, but it was more like the philosophy and history of ancient medicine, so ancient Greek and Roman medicine. And we had a text for that, going through the history and development of ancient medicine. And Dr. Mann, I don't know how he did it, managed to get not the author of the textbook, the person that author cites all the time, like his source, to come to us and speak to 7 people for a class period. That was incredible to hear it straight from the guy. Like he's the scholar for it. That was an incredible experience. Beyond that, this is even better, I think. In the anatomy section of the course, last couple weeks of class, we got to have several days of interaction with science professors, which was pretty cool. So one day, for example, went to the anatomy lab, looked at bones, laid out, identified them, did like a little bone scavenger hunt. That was neat. Dr. Bailey got to show us a brain, got to cut open a brain and look at the inside and have him lecture to us about neuroscience. That was incredible too. It made things that we were reading real. I got to see it. I got to touch these things in some cases. Dr. Chowdhury came in one day to discuss the circulatory system with a cat, a dissected cat. He showed us the circulatory system.
You didn't eat it, though.
No, thankfully. I could eat too. But I think the crown and jewel to that is our trip to the cadaver lab. We got to go to the cadaver lab. Wow. Again, as I said before, I'm an economics and English major. And in a class of 7 people, a classical studies / philosophy class of 7 people for that matter, we had to visit a cadaver lab and have an expert in biology talk to us about what we observed. And that was incredible. I hold that over my roommate's head all the time because he's a bio pre-med major and he's never been to the cadaver lab. So I make fun of him for that all the time. It was an incredible experience, and it like I said before, it made what we were reading in class real, physical, and that's going to stay with me for a long time, especially the cadaver lab part. But as far as challenges go, I can see how there could be some challenges for students. Professors, certainly. I have no idea the hours Dr. Mann put in outside of class to put this stuff together. All I can say is that I really appreciate his work in doing so because it was an incredible experience. As far as challenges for students, it can be tough, I guess, if, say, you're not interested in other fields of study, if you don't want to have that kind of well-rounded experience. So maybe science, if science didn't interest me, maybe I would not have liked those experiences that I had, but then I probably wouldn't have taken the class, would I? But another challenge, and I think this one is pretty significant that I can think of, thankfully didn't happen to us, it worked out really well, but I can see it happening, is professors of other disciplines not understanding the student's knowledge level in that field. So if, for example, we went to the anatomy lab and got a very, very dense scientific discussion, I would have been completely lost and it wouldn't have really meant something. But luckily for us, and I hope this would happen all the time, but hey, you never know. The professors were able to bring it down to our level for a class, not about the bare science of things, but about philosophy, history, and a little bit of anatomy. They were able to bring it down to our level, and that was great. I like that a lot. So yeah, collaborative teaching, great experience. I would really appreciate, it's just a great thing. Those are two very big standout experiences I had, both with Dr. Mann, in fact, and I'll take those memories with me for a long time.
I wanted to just interject here, Donnie, because one of the reasons why you came to mind when I was putting this session together is because you had also before remarked on the guest that I had in 120, because you went on 120
Yeah.
with me, right? And that always stuck out to me. We had a philosopher of religion in for the Colleen lecture one year, who was actually he's in the theology department on the West Coast, but he's a big philosopher of religion. And we often try to get clean speakers to go into classes that will have them. And so he was going to come into mine, and he was actually a really loose, sort of seat of the pants sort of guy, and so he's just like, we'll figure it out. So we're walking into class, and he says, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to be, or one of us is going to be Plato, one of us is going to be Lucretius, and we're going to have a debate. Okay? He says, which one do you want to be? Like, you're the guest, you choose. I'll be Lucretius. Okay. So we walked in, and we had a debate for an hour between Plato and Lucretius, and the students had to vote on, he'd stop every 5 minutes and say, okay, now, if you're leading Lucretius, sit closer to this side of the room. And so they'd have to gauge there, and that was just a really fun time. We did this just crazy thing. It wasn't even really a lecture. We just sat there pretending we were dead people and debating. And it was a lot of fun. So.
Great. Well, so I've been able to be involved in a couple opportunities for collaborative teaching, all of them on what you would call a course enhancement, so basically as sort of a guest lecture. And a couple of courses I have attempted to, but failed to get guest lecturers to come to a couple of mine, so I'll pitch for that again. So I have helped with the philosophy of time, talking a little bit about some of the physics involved in time. I somehow missed the chance to talk about relativity, so I think Michael got to do that part, right?
Yeah, you came in for Julian Barber.
Yeah, I came in for sort of the quantum mechanical understandings of time. So that was a very enjoyable experience. And then I also participated with Steve Westergen in a class on Dante and talked about basically a bunch of the astronomy. Dante references a lot of astronomy and kind of thinking about the Divine Comedy. And so I basically gave a brief astronomy and did a little attempting to tie it to Dante, but mostly Steve took care of that. So those are the two experiences I've had. I have attempted to get, I also teach a class called Physics in the Arts, and I've attempted to get some artists and musicians to come in and do a little collaborative teaching. So, I will continue to occasionally ask about that. But anyway, so if you have interest in those kinds of things, that'd be great. But I just want to talk a little bit from my view. So I haven't had the opportunity yet to sort of be on the side of sort of the lead instructor of one of these environments where the people come in. So just in the perspective of being willing to do that, there are some, I think, challenges or fears that come in. So obviously in the sciences, one thing that maybe is a true statement about scientists is we're a little leery or uncertain about what it will look like to go into a philosophy class. So there are certainly different stylistic techniques, different things you expect in a class, and so for me it's really weird to have a class where there's no equations on the board, and so some of it is just a fear, well, what is this going to look like, and some of it is developing a trust that the person who's invited you or whatever is going to let you fall so far foolish that you'll entirely blow things. But some of it is certainly in overcoming sort of the expectations of what does a class look like, and how is what I am used to doing going to fit in this environment, and what will be helpful here? Sort of what you're talking about, right? You don't want to be at a different level than what the students are expecting or would find useful. So that's one of the challenges, to kind of get a feel for what would be useful and how that's different than maybe the style or the normal expectations that you have in a classroom. Very similar to that, for me, when I'm thinking about drawing people in, is actually the idea of assessment. So a challenge as an instructor of those courses, I imagine, right, I haven't had to actually do it, but would be, well, how do you sort of assess the learning that goes on in that environment, right, and especially if it's taught in a very different way than you might normally teach it, right, and in terms of, so for example, right, in physics, a lot of our assessment might be done with problem solving, and obviously that's not going to be how we would assess various things. If some musicians or artists come in and talk about it, right, well, you're going to have to develop some new types of assessments that you do with students and ways of thinking about that. And so I think that could possibly be a big challenge. Now, in some fields, right, where there's good collaboration, that maybe the types of classroom environment or assessment are not really very different, and that wouldn't be a challenge. But in some cases, it could well be. But one of the things that's certainly true for me is I think it's just been a lot of fun to do that. I mean, so my personality is such that I like thinking about different things that I don't get a chance to think about, right? I mean, I think about physics a lot, and so getting a chance to think about how that ties into other fields and thinking, hearing, what actually happens in other places on campus is sometimes just kind of fun. And certainly on the realm of guest lecture, where you're going to go in for a day, it's not a big enough commitment to be too huge of a stress, and mostly it's just sort of an opportunity to kind of tie into a different part of the campus and a different community or line of thought than you might otherwise do. And my impression of it has been, maybe just because I hear from the ones who enjoyed it, but the students really enjoy it as well. I can't speak for all students, and we may just hear from the students who like it, not the ones that don't, of course, but most of the response has been quite positive in the sense of, enjoying kind of thinking about how things fit together and hearing a perspective that you might not otherwise get, and that can be very helpful to think about. It also just draws new thinking, I think, out of the people who are going to do it, right? So if you're going to go, talk about your topic in a realm that's very different than where you otherwise talk about it, you have to think about things in a new way, and so oftentimes that actually provides insight, right, actually to how you would do the things that you would normally do in your classes, right? If you're thinking about sort of how quantum mechanics and how to explain it to a group of philosophy people, right, then you sometimes, sort of coerce yourself into thinking about things differently enough that you can use those tools and those ideas in other places. So I think it's been a very positive experience. I haven't had much opportunity to do the other models of collaborative teaching, but I imagine those would also be exciting.
So Joel and I got into philosophy of music. I think it became something like, Joel's from Austin, I'm from Dallas, so we thought it'd be fun for the two Texans to come together and teach a class. That was a good idea.
Yeah, we just need a topic.
Yeah, I just need a topic. Well, yeah, that's kind of how that happened.
Turned out probably not burritos.
Food. Right.
How possible is it?
Beer. Yeah. It turned out that Joel had a strong background in the philosophy of music, and I dabbled in it as much as I have theoretical physics, I suppose, which is not a lot. But yeah, so we came up with this idea of let's do philosophy of music. And the first thing that's sort of scary about something like that is the realization that this is a topic on which I'm not an expert. And all of the classes that I teach, I'd be fairly comfortable saying that I have a certain amount of expertise on them. So I know at least 100% of what my students are going to learn this semester. So prior to our first class, I spent a lot of time reading and trying to think like a philosopher, which is terrible. And I tried to essentially become an expert in the subject.
That's how I think.
No, can't. I tried to become an expert in the subject, and by the end of our very first day, I had spent all of my ideas for the whole semester. Poor Brad.
That sounds right.
Brad was in that class. Poor Brad. Well, what I realized, so I'm thinking about, I have kind of 3 points here today. That these are sort of bits of advice that I have, not for you, because we all teach differently, we have different classes, but maybe 3 bits of advice that I have for past Blake. So if I can kind of go back to before I taught that first class with Joel, these are 3 things I wish I kept in mind. The first is that I don't have to be an expert in the whole course. I don't even have to be an expert in half of the class. Because in a thing like philosophy of music, there's philosophy, there's music, and then there's the philosophy of music when they come together. So really, I only need to be an expert in a third of the class. And I have to trust that Joel's going to be an expert in the other third, and that we're going to figure out that final third together. And we've taught this, what, 3, 4, 5 times, something, and I think we're finally getting the hang of it.
Probably get the hangover.
Too much beer, yeah. Finally getting the hang of it. For me, at least, that's really been part of it, is to stop trying to think of myself as someone who has to be an expert on the philosophy of music. That I'm a musician who's interested in learning more about the philosophy of music. I'm going to let Joel do the philosophy part of it. And that was a big help. The second one, I think the thing that I like the most about team teaching, and the thing that I hear the most about from our students who have taken this class, be willing to have a conversation with your collaborator. It's just the best part of team teaching, is when, you know, it's hard sometimes to solicit those higher conversations with your students when, oh, I don't know, they haven't done the reading that you assigned to do. That never happens. And you know, it's hard to, we taught this over J term, it's hard to have a 3-hour conversation with your class when none of them have done the reading. Or haven't read it to the extent that Joel and I might have. So it's just totally awesome for us to then have a conversation. To let Joel throw out a question, you wait the requisite time where they sit awkwardly and not have anything to say. So then I'll throw something out there, and we can just kind of go back and forth. And it's fantastic because our students sort of find that disarming. Because we're just having a totally natural, organic, it's not forced, not planned conversation about things, because I don't know any more about this stuff than they do. Maybe a little bit, but only a skosh. But then what will happen is when we start having this conversation and suddenly they feel free to ask a question, to maybe get involved, because they're not on the spot anymore. Now, you know, we're having conversations, I'm saying the stupid things, and Joel's correcting me, or maybe vice versa. But then they don't feel so bad as to then ask a question, wait, what you said, existentialism, let's talk about that. What would you mean by that? All right, we'll go back into that. Who's this John Cage guy? Interesting thing you asked. Well, let's talk about that. So then they get to be part of a conversation. We're not really forcing them into it. And then by the end of the class, we sort of kind of let go of control a little bit. So they're now the ones leading the conversation. But it's a totally natural, organic thing, and I love that. Yeah, and the last one I'd say is, and this was hard for me, don't get competitive. Yeah, my very first, again, Brad was in this class, I keep saying it, sorry, Brad. My very first time teaching this class, Joel and I kind of we did the first day together, and then he had the first lecture, and I realized quickly that the students responded very well to him, and that he just has this way of teaching that kind of got them involved, and everyone had a good time. And I also realized that is not the way I teach a class. Nothing against the way he teaches it, but that's just not how I've learned to teach a subject. So I quickly went home that night and tried to retool however many decades of pedagogy so that I could teach more like Joel. And as you can imagine, the results weren't very good. It was, every day I kept trying to think, well, how could I maybe make this big theoretical point suddenly conversational, or what other things can we talk about so that I can be more like Joel? And it didn't work. It really didn't. I kept trying to fix things, but I could never seem to right the ship from my angle. But by this last time around, I'd sort of given up on that. As Marcy said, good teaching is good teaching. So by the last time around, I was happy to just do my thing, teach the way that I teach, the way I think that I teach well, and not try to be Joel Mann, because you know what? I can't be Joel Mann. For better or for worse.
Probably a good thing.
Door get dragged.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I really think this is the best version of the class we've had. And for my end, it really was, because I wasn't trying to be somebody that I'm not.
Yeah.
And they responded to that. They responded to the fact that I was teaching well and I was enjoying how I was teaching, that I wasn't trying to be somebody I'm not. So I would say that those are the three things. Number one, don't try to be an expert in the whole topic. That's just too much homework. Be an expert in a third of it, and then discover the second third, the third third with your students. Second, have the conversation. I really can't stress that enough. Just be willing to talk with your collaborator, and don't try to talk down to the students and try to simplify things. Just talk. As I said, if you only know a third of the topic and he or she only knows a third of the topic, then discover that other third together, and they'll get in on that. They'll love that. And then don't be competitive. Know how you teach and teach that way.
I just real quick wanted to interject here that you did mention it briefly, but the way we've been able to team teach this course is doing it in the summer.
Did you split the stipend?
Right, we split the stipend.
do a Maymester, I guess summer, whole summer. term.
Usually Maymaster, sometimes,
Yeah.
once it was the second session, but.
Yeah, that's true, and, because neither one of us really have room in our course loads to pick up, to release the 2 credits and pick them up someplace else. This has worked really, really well for us. Yeah, thanks.
So the gift of the last person is everything's been said. But, I mean, I'm echoing a lot of what has already been said and has been established. I was in Joel and Blake's very first philosophy of music class, which was an exciting time. It's still in GMS, so it seems like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But, so I was a music ed major here at St. Norbert College. I graduated in that program, then I came back and was studying philosophy in preparation to go study theology. So in some ways, I felt like the expert coming into this philosophy of music class, and I'm like, this will be great. And I quickly realized that on both ends of the spectrum, there was stuff I didn't know. Now that's just a student thinking higher of himself than need be. But I appreciated the opportunity to field questions and receive multiple viewpoints on that, especially in areas that I was familiar with already. It just helped my own learning process and kind of capping what my programs were here at St. Norbert College. And there was also this increased awareness of the relationship of one topic out of these 2 things that I've already been familiar with. So like Blake said, there's music, there's philosophy, suddenly there's philosophy of music. Of is very operative there. And learning how just to manipulate that whole genre of research and idea making was important for me, and then also inspired my own research, my own interest in research perhaps, into those areas that I wasn't familiar with and felt like I should have been. And so I really kind of took my own learning by the horns. I don't know if that's common or not, but I think it was just because I had dabbled in both areas that I wanted to really try to figure it out for myself. Speaking virtuously here, there was also this element of humility that I witnessed as a student, because like Blake said, there's this notion of competition. At the same time, I noticed both of them admitting when they didn't know something, which as a student was incredibly impressive to me, because suddenly you have this person who's normally just making up answers when they don't know, saying, wow, I don't know that answer, let me refer to my colleague. And I mean, I do it, so I know what happens. So that witnessing of humility was really important to me in my own understanding of what it means to be an educator. Let me see. I mean, everything else I think that's been said has been said. Perhaps though the most significant moment for me, a few times I remember this happening, is one of these 2 would suggest something or introduce a topic that the other one had no idea of, and made it very well known that this was like a new concept for them, which for me meant that the professor and I just automatically became co-learners together. And I thought that was a really important thing for professors to model, for students to understand that indeed academia isn't a one and done kind of thing, that together we learn this information and move forward. And so I think if nothing else, collaborative learning or teaching gives learners this incredible model of a different way of learning, especially from most of our contexts from which we come. Learning is one person imparting knowledge on many other people. And so to have this new kind of model, I mean, as a musician, I suppose collaboration is built in, but it's mostly pure collaboration. When you're in ensemble, you all have to do the same thing to make music. But to see it actually happening professionally in front of you was a whole new dynamic that was really important for me. So.
I have many memories of you from that first iteration of the course, but one of my favorite memories is you coming back to class one day and saying that you were talking to some old Norbertine over at the Abbey. I can't remember who it was you were talking to. And you mentioning that you were in this philosophy of music class. And apparently, like, you suddenly just like snapped to attention. And he said, what are you studying? And you said, well, we're reading through Hanslick right now, music formalism, right? And he just went off on how, yeah, Hanslick's where it's at, right? And you got up and you're like a long conversation over Hansel and musical formalism.
I came home from a lecture, went home to a lecture from a lecture, which was. I mean, actually, there was a piece of music I had never heard. It was Spinal Meningitis that I still refer to as when we were talking about what does music evoke fear or something.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry
really
about that.
creepy.
It's very.
But yeah, Mozart didn't write it. I know that.
All right, great. Well, what I'd like to do now, because I don't really have anything to add to that. I think they did a great job. But I was hoping that, if you'll indulge me, that we could actually pair up. And if we could pair up as best as possible with people outside of our discipline, even better outside of division. And if we could spend a few minutes, 15, 20 minutes or so, actually trying to sketch out a collaborative course of some kind, either on the course delivery model or course design model, preferably. Obviously, you're not going to be able to get into too much detail, but if you just sort of like talk to each other and write up and get an idea and come up with something that passes for a course description.
How about names in the hat, Joel? Make it a lottery.
Well, I don't have everybody's names, but we could just. We don't have a hat either, but
It comes down to logistics.
we got an empty wine bottle. We can spin the bottle, I guess.
It's Friday.
So I'm trying to match that.
I'm a humanities person
Yeah.
looking for a non-humanities. I'm looking for science.
We've got some scientists in the room.
Yeah.
So-
All right, I'm with Becky, science, humanities. Okay.
Should we actually sort of separate musicians first? Or can you write to it? We spend 5 minutes talking